it that way. Okay, Rashonda, are you going to go ahead and give the instructions so we can get started?
Yes, I'm going live right now on Facebook. Give me a moment.
Okay.
Here we go. Great, awesome. All right, let me share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we can.
Great.
Yeah, just go ahead and put it in presentation mode, please.
Okay. There we go. Good afternoon. You don't see it?
No,
You good?
go ahead.
Good afternoon. I would like to start off by thanking everyone for joining us today for our Ducks in a Row series, session 4. I would like to remind everyone that all mics will remain muted during the presentation. If you have any comments, please insert them into the chat. We will be reading them throughout the presentation. If you have any questions during our Q&A segment, you can add them into the chat or you can use the raise hand feature. Now I would like to turn things over to the president of the Urban Chamber, Ken Evans, who will be doing our welcome. Ken.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Rashonda, quick administrative note, please look for Keith Pfeiffer and try to bring him in, please. And there may be other people waiting. I'd like to welcome you all to our Ducks in a Row series, session 4. Today we're going to talk about accounting and legal essentials. And the reason why we're doing this is because when the pandemic hit, one of the things we recognized is that some of our members and non-members were running into some challenges in terms of accessing some of the resources that are out there to help people out that are experiencing challenges related to COVID-19. So we said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that we do a series called Getting Your Ducks in a Row, hence the term Ducks in a Row, so that we can make sure that as you move forward, you'll be able to do business better. First, I'd like to make sure you know that we appreciate our sponsors, Schwab Bank. Go back one slide, please. I want to make sure that we say thank you very much, because an event like this is not possible unless we have our sponsors like Charles Schwab Bank. So we're glad that they were able to provide us with the support necessary to do this capacity building, if you will, so that our businesses can move forward. Next up, just to give you a general idea for what we'll be doing today, we will start out with what I'm doing right now, which is basically giving you the introductions and the instructions for today. And then we'll spend about a half an hour where we have a moderator, Keith Pfeiffer. He's a business owner, longtime entrepreneur. But in addition to that, he also has an appreciation for the corporate things or the structural things that you need to do to either start a business or to keep a business going so that you can grow it. So we have a great moderator. In addition to that, we have 2 panelists, one of which has a background in law and how to structure things from beginning to end. And that's Ms. Shane Young of Young Law Group. And then last but not least, we also have with us today, Ms. Gloria Wright of Right Way Business Services. She's a panelist, and she'll be covering things that you need to keep in mind from an accounting standpoint, because again, as we say around the Urban Chamber, you need to make sure that you begin with the end in mind. So that's both from an accounting standpoint as well as a legal standpoint. Finally, if you have questions or comments along the way, it will be a little bit interactive towards the end. Please make sure that you type them into the chat room, and then our moderator will pick them up, or I will help pick them up as well. And without further ado, I want to turn today's session over to our moderator, Mr. Keith Pfeiffer, owner of the Pfeiffer Group, but beyond that, owner of a franchise, Burger I Am. Keith, welcome to today's presentation.
Let's see. Just need to double check, make sure you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you just fine.
So I appreciate you setting this up. I think it's really important, not only from the business side, but also for our people. I've learned a lot of different things from Ken, and as we see, everybody wants to be the experts on social media, etc. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. So I asked Ken, what's the best way of getting this out? Whether we set up in this format or have certain people come into places to sit down and kind of ask the questions. Nobody wants to be that person that doesn't know. Everybody likes to sit in the room and pretend like they know what's going on. They want to be the person in the classroom raising their hand saying, hey, I didn't understand that, but I've seen a lot of this lately on social media, giving the wrong information as far as how to start a business, what's important, and leaving out all the basic steps, from starting, from the LLC to the tax aspect, and just understanding what business is, where the difference, like you and I discussed, was you can either have a business or you can, have a hobby. So there's a big difference in doing the right thing. So I think this is key in regards to educating others instead of keeping all the knowledge amongst ourselves. So let's see, what I would like to do is definitely, start the conversation as far as what business is, and if there's anyone that has any questions in regards to, starting that off. I'm all for answering questions. I mean, this is the format to learn. Ken, I have a question for you. I see there's 12 attendees here. How do I, if there's questions, how do I pull their questions in?
Oh, it'll automatically show up in the chat room, and we'll help moderate that for you.
Okay.
So there should be a list of questions that we provided you to get things started. If not, I can help out there as well.
Yeah, let's, unfortunately, I don't see that list.
I can help out.
Okay.
I tell you what, let me hop in and we'll kind of do this in a tag team, because I
Okay.
see at the Urban Chamber family here. Let me start out with Ms. Young and just ask her a quick question, a generic question. Why is it important to think about the structure that you use when you're first getting your business started, in terms of whether you're going to pick an LLC or an S corporation or a C corporation? We'll come back to that specific, but why just in general is it important to think about how you're going to structure yourself?
It's important for a lot of different reasons. One, I think, is it's really the first step in your business, right? And many times if you're not even prepared to make that first decision, that first step, that holds you back, right? So really having a good guidance, having a good idea, it's going to depend on a lot of things as far as what type of business entity you're going to want to start. And I can talk about those when we get into the more specifics as far as the different structures that are available. But it's really just making sure before you pick a type of legal entity, you really want to get clear on what you're going to be doing. What is your business vision? What are the services you want to provide? What are the products you're going to provide if there's a difference? What's your plan for moving forward? Who's going to be doing the work? Where are you going to be getting capital to be able to run your business? What investments are you willing to make? What sacrifices are you willing to make? How much time? What's your time investment? Because that's often your time is your most valuable resource. You can always make more money. You can always, get other resources, but you can't ever get your time back. So really having a good plan to start out with, and then having resources and guidance on how to make those proper decisions along the way. So I think really when you're going through that, starting with asking questions and getting help before you just dive in and form an LLC or start as a sole proprietor, because there are a lot of consequences that you may not be aware of when you do that.
And we'll definitely come back to that. And then what I want to do is similar question of Ms. Wright at a generic level. Why is it important to think about how you're going to structure yourself in terms of quote unquote, how you're going to keep your books when you're first getting started?
Basically, what I found in my career, a lot of businesses open up and go into business without doing any proper research. They must understand the legal ramifications of what they are doing. And there are several different ways one can do this. Let me give you some brief descriptions on the different business entities that will help. The easiest one is sole proprietor. And it's one of those things where there are advantages and disadvantages. For a sole proprietor, you're on your own. It's easy to set up, and you have an opportunity to do flexible management. It's a pass-through taxation system. That's what we must be concerned about. The Internal Revenue Service and the taxation that goes with this. A sole proprietorship is a pass-through, and it's the right to the owner's right straight into the owner's individual tax return. There are advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage that I think is you have unlimited liability. You're responsible as a sole proprietor for all of your debts and liabilities of the business. You are subject to self-employment tax on the profits at 15.3%. That's one of the major disadvantages. You have no help. You're on your own. And the next thing.
Right. So what you're covering is that we want people to understand that as we go into this conversation, there are both legal ramifications and tax or financial ramifications,
Yes,
depending on how you structure. And I know a lot of times people go down the pathway of being a sole proprietor because, quote unquote, it's the easy thing to do, but just realize that there are some ramifications. And now I want to come back to Ms. Young on this,
okay.
because I think you introduced some of the advantages and disadvantages, but I want Ms. Young to comment a little bit more on the disadvantages of being a sole proprietor from a legal standpoint, and then we'll cover some of the other formation or ways to formulate a company. But go ahead, Ms. Young.
Yes, thank you, Ken. So when it comes to a sole prop, it's actually not even a legal entity. So it's really just you going out into the world, offering your services, your products, and there's no liability protection, as Ms. Gloria mentioned. So if you engage in activity, if you engage in business and someone sues you or sues the business, not only are your business assets at risk, but your personal assets as well. So your house, your retirement accounts, your bank accounts, all of those things can be taken away by a lawsuit. So you want to be careful about that. And Ken, you mentioned that a lot of people unfortunately make that mistake. They think that they can go on the Secretary of State's website, pick sole proprietorship. The fees are very minimal. So they file and they think that they are registered as an entity. You are not a legal entity. There is absolutely zero liability protection when it comes to being a sole prop. Now, as far as legal entities that are common here in Nevada, the most common is an LLC, a limited liability company. And so it's really the default. Another common legal entity is a corporation. Now, whether you decide to go the LLC route or the corporation route is going to depend on a lot of different things, like the type of business that you have, how it's funded, what your growth strategy is, what your exit strategy is, how it's going to be managed, you know, the day-to-day things. So really, the most common is an LLC. But if you are engaged in a business where it's going to be high growth and you're looking for certain capital, like sophisticated funding, maybe like a startup tech company, that might be better suited in the corporation realm. Also, if you are looking to have international investors, you know, that's another example where a corporation would be a good fit. And if you're wanting to differentiate between different types of stock, corporation, you know, that's another example. Otherwise, the LLC is usually the most common type of business entity. And then beyond that, I know that there are a lot of there's a lot of confusion in terms of S corporations, C corporations, and people believe that those are legal entities as well. Those are not legal entities. Those are actually tax elections that you make with respect to the type of business that you have. So it's really more focused on tax treatment. S corporation, when you make that election to be taxed as an S corp, you can actually be, your legal entity can actually be an LLC. For example, my law firm is a PLLC. It's a professional limited liability company. So only certain types of businesses can have that designation, like law firms, of physicians, things like that. But in essence, it's an LLC. How I'm taxed, or how I've elected to be taxed, is as an S corp, because there's a single level of taxation. So I get taxed basically on my personal return. With a corporation, that's usually where it's a larger business, you know, multiple owners, things like that. And then there's double taxation at the corporate level and then at the individual level.
So along those lines, we have a question here from Regina Jones. Her question states, she's a sole proprietor business, newly off the ground, but growing, and she loves it. She's now seeking more creative funding as a minority business owner after her first year. Which she's asking, she wants to own her own strip mall and will then flip to LLC or S Corp. Do you recommend loans versus grants or vice versa as I grow? So her question is two-part. I guess the first thing we can discuss in regards to this is an LLC or S Corp from her S proprietor, or excuse me, her sole proprietorship.
Right. So it sounds like, as far as a legal entity, most likely an LLC would probably be the best thing. If it's a small business, you're not having multiple investors, international investors, you're not looking for sophisticated capital infusion into your business. An LLC, as far as a legal entity, may be a good option. I think you mentioned whether it's an LLC or an S Corp. Remember, the S Corp is not a legal entity. It's an election as far as tax treatment. So you could form an LLC and then make the election to be taxed as an S Corp. So that election would be something that you want to discuss with a tax advisor, like your CPA, your accountant. You know, I believe Miss Gloria has expertise in that area. And as far as which type of entity to set up, that's definitely my realm. Without knowing more details and having more of a one-on-one discussion, it's hard for me to really dive into really which type of entity would be the best one. But my sense is that an LLC would be good. Now, it's really important that because you're already engaged in business activity, if there were to be a claim, even if it was made later, if it happened during this time, you don't have any liability protection. So it's really important that you get your entity set up as soon as possible, and hopefully before, if you haven't started your business, before you actually engage in business activity, right? making sure you not only set it up correctly, there are a lot of corporate formalities that you have to follow on the legal side. It's not as simple as just going to the Secretary of State and filing as an LLC, paying your 425 filing fee and getting your business license. It seems very simple because of how it's set up. You know, you're checking some boxes, you're filling in some forms, but there's a lot more to it. There are certain formalities that need to be met in order for you to actually take advantage of the LLC, the limited liability protection. So again, a common mistake is people are either not forming their entities, period, or they're forming them, but they're not fulfilling their requirements on the legal end as far as their corporate structures are concerned. So it's not enough to just go to the Secretary of State, do your annual filing, and think that you have liability protection. If that's all that you're doing and someone sues you, potentially what they can do is pierce the corporate veil. So that's a legal theory where people that are making claims against you or your business can not only come after and take your business assets, but your personal assets as well, your house, your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, investments, all of those things. So if you're wanting to set up an LLC or you have set up an LLC, some of the other requirements include things like making sure you're keeping your assets separate. So you've got your personal assets, you've got your corporate assets, you've got a separate business bank account. You are not commingling those funds. That's really, really important. Making sure that you have proper corporate records. So you're keeping track and memorializing important events. Even if it's just you, even if it's just you as the owner, just having those records is really important. Not only for liability reasons, but also say down the road when your business is very, very successful and it's worth a lot of money and someone wants to buy it from you, these are things that they're going to be looking at, like how good are your corporate records? Not just how good is your business, but how good are your records? Have you been keeping up with your legal requirements? Have you been doing your accounting? Like, what do your books look like? How much money have you invested into the company? Have you been tracking those things? So making sure corporate formalities also include your legal documents. So not just filing with the Secretary of State as an LLC, but having your governing documents like your operating agreement. I can't tell you how many times clients come into my office and they've been operating their business for months, years sometimes, and I ask them about simple things, simple things, including their corporate documents. And yeah, I mean, I shouldn't say simple, but foundational things. Truly foundational things. And they have no idea what that is, or they think that they don't need it because it's just them. It's, they're the sole member or the sole owner of their business. You still need an operating agreement, or in the case of a corporation, you've got bylaws and other corporate documents that you need to make sure that you've got in place.
To that point, Regina posted another question, which I'll get to shortly here, Regina. In regards to the sole proprietor, the LLC, the S Corp and C Corp, can you give us a brief description of each classification? Because I've gotten this question this morning from Facebook in regards to people trying to figure out which entity should they set up, and you touched on a very good point on the legal aspect.
So just a rundown of those different terms?
Yes.
Okay, so sole proprietor is not a legal entity. That is where you just basically, you can file as a sole prop on the Secretary of State. I see a lot of realtors do that because they're told that they have to be registered with the state in order to be paid through their brokers and things like that. But a sole prop does not offer any liability protection. So that's zero liability protection. It's not a legal entity. It's just you going out into the world and offering your services, your products. The LLC is a limited liability company. That is an actual legal entity that you can form, that you file with the Secretary of State. And And also a corporation is another legal entity. So usually you're deciding between LLC or corporation. Those are typically the two. Now, whether you go the LLC route or the corporation route is going to depend on a few factors, like the type of business that you're running, how it's being funded, what your growth strategy is, what your exit strategy is. If you are planning on having a high growth business, then you may consider a corporation. If you're looking to have other investments, other investors like out of the country, foreign investors, corporation may be better suited for you, or more sophisticated capital coming into your business or funding. A corporation may be better. Otherwise, LLC is the default, and but both offer the same level of liability protection, provided that not only do you form with the Secretary of State as a legal entity, but you meet the corporate requirements that I was talking about a moment ago. So making sure you've got your corporate records, your corporate agreements like bylaws, meeting minutes, operating agreement, whatever is applicable in your type of business and legal entity. You're not commingling funds. We want to make sure we're keeping that separate, and the record keeping and the maintenance. So basically, you don't want to have anyone be able to attack your business as a shell. And ways for them to attack your business are if you totally disregard those requirements as far as how you're running your business on the corporate formalities side. So we talked a little bit about S corps, so S corporations and C corporations. Those are not legal entities. Those are tax elections. So you can have an LLC and make your tax election on how you're going to be taxed as an S corp. And that's how I mentioned I have my business set up. So that's something that's a distinction or a determination that you're going to want to make with your tax advisor to make sure that it's the most beneficial. So that's another important thing, is making sure that you're talking to people that can guide you, and you're not just making decisions because you did a little research on the internet or someone told you this is how they did it. That's how people get in trouble. So yeah, it happens all the time, and
it does, and too many people want to give it, advice on the internet, etc. And since we actually have a tax professional, Ms. Wright, can you expand on the aspect on the LLC as far as being taxed, as an S corp or C corp?
Yes. The limited liability corporation, that's what it is. It can be owned by one person or by two or more. It depends. The business entity is specially designed to protect your personal assets from the liabilities of the business. When you would file your tax return, your 1040, the LLC would go on it. It's also like a subchapter S corporation pass-through. You would include your loss or your gain, and you're taxed on it. Self-employment tax applies to it. The subchapter S corporation, like I said, is a pass-through entity. It's a special kind of tax status that corporations, limited liabilities, or even partnerships, something which we haven't even talked about yet, can select. The S corporation status doesn't alter the business operation, but it moves the tax burdens from the business to the owners themselves. In other words, you would be paying the tax. What most people would do, I myself am an S corp, okay? And it's a matter of personal preference as to what you would feel. Some people are more comfortable with one thing than another. And the biggie is a C corp. It is a legal entity, and its complete structure is business. And it's most often used to run a large company that has shareholders and investors. It has double the disadvantage of a corporation is the taxation. Although the corporation liability protection is great for the owners. They're protected from the debts and the liabilities of the business. There is double taxation because the corporation would be paying its own tax. It's gone down from 35% to 25 now. We don't know what the future holds, but there's always dividends, and that's also taxed. So that means double taxation, okay? It can be tedious, it's expensive to set up, and you have to create your board of directors for a corporation. You have corporate officers, you issue stock to your shareholders, and you hold, and that is a must, IRS holds you to it, annual board meetings. Now, I particularly, like I said, I like the subchapter S. Because like it said, it's a pass-through, but you are on top of it. The most important thing I would say to anyone right now starting a business, keep your records. Because should you be under audit, what you say you have done is not what you can prove. You must be able to prove everything that you put on a tax return. You never really know when you're going to be audited. Nobody knows. That's never been set up.
You know, Ms. Wright, you hit a valid point in regards to, you know, keeping records, you know, basically the chart of accounts. So what's the you know, you just talked about, you know, being audited, but what's repercussions as far as the short and the long term?
The short and the long term is number one, should you be audited and a tax assessed to you, there are two things you need to remember: penalties and taxation. It isn't just the tax that you're concerned about. Penalties can be applied, criminal and civil, okay? And what you have to remember, penalties can be abated, but interest is applied as if you had a credit card. That is never abated. Penalties can be, but not interest, okay? My thing, like I said, is to remember record keeping, record keeping, record keeping. That is the key. And remember, one of the things you have to remember if you are a corporate person, you have to take a salary. That is not a choice. If you work for a corporation, you must take a salary or you will be penalized.
So I want to get back to, we have a couple of questions and I want to make sure that we get everything answered. So this will actually apply on the legal aspect, and also I have another one in regards to
the bookkeeping.
Yeah, definitely. Hold on, let me make sure I get both of them in place. Okay. One is on the requirements in regards to, we didn't discuss this on the 501c. Kerry has a question. He has both a 501c set up and as an S Corp and also an LLC. Both are set up for two separate but complementary purposes. He was recently informed he was bordering on an ethics violation by potentially competing against my employer with regards to the LLC. Now, he's now placing the LLC on hold until retire and going back into reestablishing the 501c, as this was not deemed as a conflict. Is there a requirement that a business entity can be deemed inoperable before any penalties or other IRS requirements take effect? With this decision, would it be wise to complete my corporate minutes to reflect this action?
Are you asking me?
I'm gonna hop in. Actually, I'm gonna hop in here. Forgive me. I'm gonna be the super moderator. What I'm gonna suggest here is Carrie Reed. Shane Young has put her contact information in the chat room, and what I'm gonna suggest is that you follow up, set up a consultation. I'm sure there's a way to get an initial consultation.
Consultation, yeah.
Yeah. But I would suggest you do that because one of the things we want to be careful about doing is administering overly specific information today that could get you or one of our professionals in an inappropriate place. So we do, it's not that we don't want to address it. So here's how I'm going to rephrase things, if I may. Ms. Young, from your standpoint, are there differences to consider from a legal standpoint in terms of an LLC versus how you need to set up something for a 501c3 charitable purpose?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of, the requirements are completely different, and it has to do with the purpose. So 501c3 are, for nonprofit. So those, and there's a lot of administrative burden that I don't think a lot of people realize when they set out to set up a nonprofit. They think like, oh, well, I want to set up a nonprofit, because I'm doing good in the community. I want to serve, in this way. And many times it's actually not in your best interest to set up a legal entity like that, like a 501c3. There are actually other resources right here in Las Vegas. So if you have a 501c3, if you are looking into or considering setting up a nonprofit, those are things that I can do, I can help with. But what I tell clients when they're reaching out to me for help on the nonprofit side is, look, before you write me a check, go and look at these resources. So I have a colleague at the Nevada Community Foundation. Ken, I don't know if you're familiar. John Brosco is a good friend of mine there. So with all of my clients or all prospects that contact me about 501c3s or nonprofit organizations, I always say, go talk to John first, because there are ways where you can actually have your organization, your nonprofit, under the umbrella of Nevada Community Foundations and not have to meet all of the really burdensome administrative requirements of keeping up with your 501c3, but you can actually get benefits and operate in the manner that you want. So I always say, look at that first on the nonprofit side. So, so really, when it comes to my guidance is, it really depends. If you want to set up a legal entity and it's for profit, then we'll look at what's the best type of legal structure for that. If your purpose is not for profit and it's, you meet the requirements of a nonprofit organization, then we would explore whether it's to set up as your own independent 501c3, or maybe work with a foundation like Nevada Community Foundation, where you can use those resources instead.
Excellent.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And again, what I would point out to everyone is that Ms. Young has typed her contact information into our chat room if you need to follow up. Ms. Wright, I think another question that you were talking about, the fact that people need to make sure that they are prepared for a possible audit. So let me ask a basic question. How long should people keep their records? And then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Pfeiffer to continue the conversation.
It depends. Normally, 3 to 4 years is what is required. It depends whether they're financial, checking, cash, things of that type for taxes. However, if you have not certified all of your funds for taxation, it never closes. They can always come back. So that's one of the things you need to know. But that's why I was insisting record keeping. Be sure you're able to prove what you said you did. I think we're looking at the news right now where we're finding there's a problem. They can come back indefinitely.
Yep. And we'll leave it at that.
And we'll leave that right there.
One of the interesting things in regards to the liability aspect, and we'll make sure that we include this at another time, is also insurance, because on the legal aspect on that, and just protecting yourself is not enough by creating, the LLC, S Corp, et cetera. It's, the insurances that are involved. So, Shane, you touched on something that I was actually going to bring up, and I realized it's in the notes here, And that is, you know, and anybody can chime in on this as far as what resources are available to help, because there's too many new business owners that want to be, that want to start a business, but they have nowhere to turn to. So unfortunately, they're looking on Facebook, they're looking on the internet, and they're taking that information without, you know, understanding not only the legal ramifications, but just understanding their business. You know, we all know that starting a business is not a matter of just, you know, creating an LLC or an S corp, but also understanding the business plan, the SWOT analysis, and et cetera. But what resources do they have besides this resource? What resources, you know, are available, you know, for someone that wants to learn? And anyone can speak on this.
Can I add a little bit right there?
Yes, ma'am.
There are resources available, okay? I would suggest to anyone interested in opening a business, there are Internal Revenue Service government and state websites that are available. Number one, there is the Chamber of Commerce. Number two. Number three, there is the SBA government. Plus, if you want to do a little research, go online or to the library. Then turn to your accountant or your tax lawyer. They too can give you some information on resources.
Thank you. Ken, do you have anything to add there? Ken, I think your mic is off.
He knew that I would have something. Forgive me. I'm still, after all these Zoom calls, I'm still doing that. So, there we go. Definitely, I'm glad he tossed it to me. At the Urban Chamber of Commerce, we have a business success center, and we have multiple resource partners. I want to highlight a couple. First and foremost is the Nevada Small Business Development Center, or NSBDC. They provide, to the point that Ms. Young made a few minutes ago, they provide complimentary, i.e. free consultation services to get you started, as long as it's not too complicated. In addition to that, there's the Service Corps of Retired Executives, or SCORE. That's another good source that is complimentary, again, as long as it's not too complicated. So I can't overemphasize the fact, especially if you're brand new and you need to talk through a strategy or how to get started, go to NSBDC or go to SCORE. What you will also find is at a Chamber of Commerce, you have individuals like Ms. Wright and Ms. Young that are members of the chamber or other business organizations. They're another good resource as well. As long as it's not too complicated, you may be able to get an initial consultation. But again, once you get into something a bit more involved, yes, that's when there may be fees involved, because they, like any other business, are a business. But again, I point out the fact that go to NSBDC or SCORE. I will type those links in. The last thing I want to mention is if you go to the State of Nevada Department of Business and Industry website, there's also what we call the roadmap. The roadmap is an interactive site that you can go to, and regardless of the type of information you're looking for, it will point you in the direction of multiple resources.
Thank you, Ken. Shane, do you have anything to add on top of that?
Well, the resources that Ms. Gloria and Ken shared, I'm absolutely on board with those. Those are great resources. I've worked a lot with SCORE, and I know that SCORE has been super helpful to a lot of small business or aspiring business owners. As far as the resources that I provide, I do educational events all the time. I have a webinar that I'm doing actually tonight at 6 p.m. So I put the link here. It's younglawlive.com. You can register there and actually log on right there to my website to watch the webinar. Or if you can't make it during one of the live broadcasts, you can watch it on demand. So I try to make resources available for everyone at any time. We do a wine and wills once a month. That'll be in my office October 7th at 6 p.m. I'll put the link there. It's ylgwine.com. Also, for anyone that attends one of my events, I do offer a complimentary family wealth planning session. So that family wealth planning session is focused primarily on estate planning, right? So that's a whole other topic that we haven't touched, but super important. But we also talk about your business during that time, because your business is an asset. And I can't tell you how many times clients will come in, they are business owners, they may have done their planning, they've got a will, maybe a trust, other documents, even recently. And when I ask them about their business and whether their business is funded to their trust, which means, holding title, held within your trust, they look at me like a deer in headlights. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And that's why this information and education is so, so important, especially in our community. I think there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lack of access, especially when it comes to lawyers and other professionals in our community. And so I really encourage people to utilize those resources. Get the information. I'm constantly throwing it out there. I'm putting it all over my social media. I've got my blogs posted all the time. I posted a blog on tax tips for this year. So use those resources. Watch the webinar, attend an event. I do offer the complimentary, as I mentioned, the complimentary family wealth for anyone that attends a webinar or Wine and Wills. Normally that session, because it's a 2-hour session, it's $750, but you get that free if you attend and you do a little bit of homework. So similarly, I do a business planning session that I offer to business clients in a similar fashion.
I think a lot of us need to relate to that and understand what you just said. And I think you need to say that part again, because the 2-hour aspect of being able to learn from a lawyer for 2 hours, and you're absolutely right. $750, I think actually is, on the lower level. Yes. So I think, we need to take advantage of it. And those of you that are paying attention right now to this, pass this information along, because this is a very unique opportunity. And unfortunately, we always think one of our friends knows it all, or, oh, I read it on the internet, whatever. This is an opportunity to learn and listen to a lawyer for 2 hours. And like she said, complimentary. So I think we need to take advantage of, I'll be honest with you, I'm going to take advantage of it. I'll be on there in regards to, learning, and I'm going to pass along the information so I can invite others. These are the kind of things that we have to do as a community to share this knowledge. The problem that I see a lot of us, everybody wants to be the expert and know, little bits of it. So we have the professionals here, so let's make sure we take advantage of it. And even to the point, ask questions, speak up, stop thinking you have to be ashamed that you don't know. I'm going to ask questions, not ashamed. So expect me, to speak on things, because there's things I don't know. And especially, my wife talked about this. We don't have an estate plan. Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of us, unfortunately, that don't, because when we see that, it's taboo to say, oh, we have estate planning. No, it's not just a will. We need to understand. And I think that's where this will be an interesting conversation. I'm hoping my wife will be home by the time, to actually watch this. So
yay! Yes.
Perfect. And I wanted to hop in for a minute to emphasize the point that Keith is making, and then I want to highlight Mr. Pfeiffer as well in a positive way. When I started my company, and that's one thing that I like to remind people at the Urban Chamber, I was in their shoes before. I started an LLC from the ground up. I actually paid an attorney. There's some people, to your point, Ms. Young, they would have thought I was crazy, because early on, I paid both an attorney to draw up agreements so that I could rent the second bedroom of a condo I owned as my office space, and then on top of it, so that I could legally make use of I basically paid myself to use my vehicle. But again, I got a third-party attorney to draw up those documents for me. In addition to that, Ms. Wright, I also got an accountant to start. They gave me a small business rate, but the bottom line is they got me started the right way doing my books, so that a few years into it, if I had got a huge opportunity, I would have been in a position to take advantage of it. The reason why I'm bringing this up is I want to highlight something that Mr. Pfeiffer has graciously offered to do. We will be doing an advertising in some of the Facebook groups that we interact in conjunction with the Urban Chamber, we're going to do similar to what Ms. Young is doing with at the Young Law Group. We're going to do something, just a generic get together at his Burger I Am location, St. Rose Parkway. That's just another way we can do some outreach. And then when we do that, perhaps we'll have some individuals like Ms. Wright and Ms. Young there, and we'll just grow that opportunity. But I just wanted to highlight the fact that we at the Urban Chamber appreciate all avenues to reach people and get the right information, the appropriate information to individuals so that they get a good foundation. So thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer.
I wanted to say one thing, if you don't mind.
All right ahead.
I'm an enrolled agent. I'm licensed to practice before the U.S. Tax Court. I've been in the business since 1970. I've been an enrolled agent since 1991. What I would like to say to everyone here, what I've said to you about record keeping is entirely important, because if you don't prepare proper and accurate financial statements, you don't know what the health of your company is. This serves you too as a purpose, so that you will know exactly what you're doing. And it will help you avoid getting in trouble and costing you lots of money. I can't also mention enough the accounting software that you use. It is an important thing for you to decide, because if you have payroll, if you're going to have employees versus subcontractors, you need to know what you're doing, what is legal and what is not. And you need to know, most important, when you're looking for your software company, be sure that they are available to you on a 24/7 access for support. It's extremely important, because there are times when you wake up and you find you have a problem. I just want to remind everybody out there, we all started somewhere. I started my business in 1984 here in Las Vegas while working for the Internal Revenue Service. I had to get permission to do it, but I did do it.
Yeah.
And I've been in business ever since. So I'm saying to you, you can do it. If I could do it, you can do it. Okay?
You know, that's
Call me.
that is definitely.
I'm just making myself available.
Mhm.
You can give me a call and I'll help you answer questions. And my telephone number is 877-363-3779. And my company name is Rightway Incorporated. And so, Rightway Business Services. So call me. I'll do what I can to help you.
You know, you hit on a really good point in regards to the IT aspect and software as it relates to accounting, and I have to, chime in regards to, making sure that I set that up instead of doing it the hard way, because typically a lot of us like to take our receipts and just hand them over to Cheryl.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that, Cheryl, because I see you sitting in the background there.
I'm laughing because you're probably one of those ones who come with your receipts to get your taxes done in a shoebox.
Not at all. I definitely, have the software, but there are some receipts that, yes, they do come in the box. So I think that is definitely important, and I'm glad, you spoke up and to, take advantage of, the fact that you can call and ask questions. I mean, I don't think anybody out here should be trying to do this on their own. You have the professionals here in front of you that know. A lot of us, along those lines, when we talk about some of the things we've all learned from when we started doing business. Ken just touched on one as far as how he started. The same thing with me. And, I'll be more than happy, and I always speak up as far as, anytime anybody has questions, I can give any advice. The hard part with us is, with our people is that we're scared to ask for help because we don't want to look like we don't, as if we don't know. There's plenty of us out there that, will struggle, and, Ken has this saying, I told him I was going to steal it from him, and that is, the student has to be ready for the teaching. And there's plenty of us that can take this to heart and realize, that we're constantly learning. No matter how long I've been in business, I'm constantly learning, and it's great to surround yourself, with the right circle to make sure that you can expand on your knowledge. So those of us have to be ready to accept the teaching. So there's, one of the things I'd like to ask, not only is because I get these questions, people always want to know, or they're asking for advice as far as like, what have I learned? Or, in regards to business. For those of you, and, Ms. Wright, you just talked about you've been in business 84, so there's a lot of things that you have, seen and what you could have done differently. We all, hindsight is 2020. So anybody, please speak up. We want to make sure we touch on this as a last topic, so that, this kind of advice can be passed along to others. So, Shane, can you talk about real quick, kind of what you've learned?
Yeah, as a business owner, so I think that's what also gives a more relatable sense when I work with business owners, because I'm a business owner myself, right? When I was working for the big firms, it was like, well, what type of experience do you really have? It wasn't until I had my own business that I truly understood the plights, the joys, the challenges of entrepreneurship. So one of the things that I learned, though, was you have to keep going. You have to take that step. So don't be paralyzed in fear. That is something that I think held me back initially. It took me a long time to get over the fear of failure. That's what it was. I was so used to success, in my life. I was always the straight A student, valedictorian, law school, top of the, like all that stuff. And so I had the good law firm job. I was making good money. And then I went in-house and I was a general counsel. And it wasn't until I actually lost my job. I was laid off. My company was acquired by a larger company. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so what do we do now? And I had the thoughts of, okay, my next move will probably be to do my own thing. But I was completely unprepared. And I think sometimes God or the universe, whatever that higher being is, makes things happen for you if you haven't been able to get there yourself. And that was it for me. And I just I made the decision and said, all right, I'm going to go for it. And that was 3 years ago, the best decision I ever made. I get to work with my husband. My 5 daughters are actually here, not in my office, but in the office. I was surprised that none of them came in at any time to say hello, but it's so much more. I was always passionate about the work that I did, and I always had a great work ethic. But when it's something that you've created, that you feel, I know that I'm providing value, and I know that I'm working with people that actually want to work with me, and it's just so fulfilling, and I'm so glad that I was pushed to that phase.
I appreciate that. Ken, do you have anything?
Yes, what I'll say is that our passion at the Urban Chamber is working with individuals like Ms. Young, Ms. Wright, Mr. Pfeiffer to make the journey with you. There's no need for you to make the journey by yourself. We want people to realize that there are resources out there. What you'll also see is a lot of times with entrepreneurs, sometimes to their detriment, they will figure out a way to get you the information and the knowledge free, even when they should be charging for it. But at the same time, they'll figure out a way to keep their business going too. But again, I just want people to understand that there are resources out there and people that are willing to make the journey with you. So make sure that the student's ready for the teacher, ask for help, ask questions.
Thank you, appreciate that. Ms. Wright.
Well, all I can say is it's been a journey. It's been fun. I retired from the Internal Revenue Service after 29 years of service. I came on as a military dependent at Nellis Air Force Base in 1970. I went to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office as an administrative officer. I was invited by Internal Revenue Service to come work for them. And I did so. And I have enjoyed it. And I've learned a lot. And if I can do anything to help anybody else get their business going, I'm more than willing. As you gather by that, I'm quite up in age, but I still have fun, enjoying it, and working to help others. And I stand by the chamber 100%. So thank you for
We
all
appreciate
the people out there listening. Take it, listen, pay attention, reach out, and we will touch.
Thank you. And on that note, because of time, we're actually 1 minute early. So feel free, we will definitely have another session. Feel free, to send your questions or, take advantage of some of these free services where you can chime in on a lot of these topics. If you have the questions, here, the last part I can say is this. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mhm.
That's all I'm going to say. Do not be afraid to ask for help. So, we appreciate everybody joining in. Reach out, hopefully you've learned from this and this was a value to you. Pass it along and make sure, it's about expanding your circle. So we appreciate everybody's time. I'll give it back to Ken for the last word.
Yes, very quickly, what I want to say, thank you again to our sponsor, Charles Schwab Bank. I also want to say thank you very much to Ms. Shane Young of Young Law Group. Thank you also to Gloria Wright of Right Way Business Services. And last but not least, thank you very much to Keith Pfeiffer for both being our moderator as well as being willing to help other individuals make the entrepreneurial journey. If you have any questions, you can follow up with the Urban Chamber of Commerce, 702-648-6222, or our email, info@urbanchamber.org. Either way, contact us. Again, we have resources. We have individuals that are willing to make the entrepreneurial journey with you. And with that, I say thank you all very much. We'll also be doing another Ducks in a Row series. It'll be the final sessions on building real relationships. And if you know Shondell Newsom, that's one of his favorite terms. So thank you again to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Be proactive, be productive, be profitable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.